ice storm is bringing winter weather alerts to parts of the Midwest, Great Lakes, and now the Northeast as it continues on its northward trek, lifting into the Great Lakes region tonight and into tomorrow. Heavy rain will be even further south and continue for extended periods of time. In this video, I've got details on an ice storm for the Midwest and Great Lakes. I'll be tracking the flooding and storms further south and the train of relentless storms that's continuing, and I'll give you an update on that January thaw that's continuing as well. All that in this video. Thank you so much for joining me and taking a look at those Monday evening National Weather Service alerts. You can see in those purplish blue colors, whatever you want to call them, from northeast Kansas all the way on over there to parts of southern New York. Those are winter weather advisories in that bluish purple shade. And it does include places like Chicago, Indianapolis, all the way on over through Cleveland, Ohio, and areas in between there. As we're looking at mainly an ice event, but also on the northern fringes of that advisory, we're looking at a kind of a winter weather event up there in the way of snowfall as well. So we'll be monitoring that. Please hit subscribe if you enjoy the rest of this video. Now let's get into the winter storm timing. If you're here for flooding, severe weather, trains of storms, you can skip ahead further about midway through the video. That's when we'll get into that. But you can see any freezing rain we had earlier today over parts of eastern Oklahoma, northwestern Arkansas, as well as into parts of Missouri. That's faded away. Now we're watching that zone I just circled up here from northern Missouri and Iowa through Illinois, Indiana, on over into Ohio. And you can see how the freezing rain is going to pick up throughout this evening, already getting going in some spots. Maybe could even see some freezing rain and some light ice accretion there in the parts of northeast Kansas, just north of Wichita, and between Kansas City, Missouri there, and over into central Illinois as well. But it's looking like the heaviest ice is going to get going there. Northeastern Illinois as well as northwestern Indiana here as we make our way through our evening hours. And you can see places like Chicago. This is probably going to be a freezing rain event starting off for you. Through Detroit, some pretty, light to moderate freezing rain coming on down. And again, this is looking like it's rain falling, but it's freezing on that contact, so it can be very deceiving here as to what is actually coming down. But in some of these areas, I'm kind of putting those little hash marks over here. I think if you're just south of Chicago through Fort Wayne, Indiana, on over just into the southern parts of the Cleveland metro area here, through the night tonight and early into our Tuesday morning, I would be watching for some heavy rain freezing on that contact, and this could create some very quick and decent freezing rain accretion. But again, we're still monitoring this whole zone from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, all the way on over there into Erie, Pennsylvania, even back on over here into places like Topeka, Kansas. A brief round of ice here kind of capping off this event for you. But you could see the warm front here. I just threw it out on your screen. You could see it. It's lifting north, very much so on the verge of hitting Chicago, hitting Cleveland, Ohio there, as we make our way into the early morning hours of our Tuesday. This is right around when the sun comes up. You're trying to have that morning commute in northern Indiana, northwestern Ohio. You got that light to moderate freezing rain still coming down on top of what's already fallen. Also some snow and sleet breaking out through Chicago, Detroit, and just there northward. Milwaukee, this could be a very brief but heavy snowfall event for you. Really, if you're north of that line I just drew, this is where you have that potential for some of those heavier pockets in that zone I'm circling. And we'll continue to monitor. At least it does look like the ice threat will begin to wind down as warmer air surges into this system throughout the day tomorrow. But in that colder sector, that's where we'll still continue to see snow through Muskegon there into parts of Michigan. On over through the central and northern parts of the Glove of Michigan, and then even on over into parts of New England. We will see this kind of translate on over into those zones as well. Detroit could finish off this event with a little bit more freezing rain, but notice how that snow line, even parts of places like Erie, PA, and southwestern New York turning over to rain with time in this event. And then as we go into our early Wednesday morning, you can see the Tug Hill Plateau up there in New York, on down into southern New England as well. Kind of questionable as to how much snow will actually come down here, especially in southern New England, but it definitely looks like some will be kind of lifting over that northern side of the system, and it will be in an environment at least conducive for some sort of wintry precipitation. That is for sure. You can see that continues into our midday time frame, and that is the furthest here that this HRRR model is going to go. But you could see rain really pushing in. This is our second system, and we'll talk about that relentless train in a second. Continuing with some wintry weather there in southern New England, but rain pushing in many areas that just saw wintry weather in this zone right here. But here's what we've got before any sort of warmer air rain pushes in with your ice accretion through our Wednesday. And again, on Wednesday, that's when our next system moves in. We get rid of all these problems. But until then, we have some frozen precipitation coming down. Parts of southeast Nebraska, northeast Kansas, and northwestern Missouri. Some spots maybe closer to 1/10 of an inch of ice. But if you live just south of Chicago through north central Indiana into northwestern Ohio and just southwest of Detroit, this is showing up to 0.75 inches of ice accretion. Not expecting that, but a 1/4 inch, maybe up to a 1/2 an inch locally will be possible there. You could see that glaze to 1/10 of an inch of ice continues through northeast Ohio. as well as into parts of northern Pennsylvania, and then on over down here into parts of southwestern New York as well. A light glaze in some spots of that ice, but we're also watching some of this light snowfall. So from places like Des Moines, Iowa, maybe an inch or two of snow there. You can see that goes right into that Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois border, where about 2 inches will be possible. 2 inches is going to be a good average here through southeast Wisconsin on over through south central Michigan as well. But where you get that heavier pocket of snow there, and I was mentioning Muskegon or Michigan earlier, maybe 3 to 6 inches of snow possible there. Here are those totals as they translate on over into the northeast and New England, northern PA, and some spots of southern New York, again, before any other sort of precipitation moves in with another system. A couple inches of snow possible. That does go for northern New York, Vermont as well. Might see some flakes in New York City, but not much, if anything, in the way of accumulation there. Now, here's your severe weather outlook as we make our way into our Tuesday, the 23rd. You can see a level 1 risk for severe weather, including parts of San Antonio, Texas, all the way on down to Corpus Christi, and then stretching on over into parts of south central Louisiana. That is going to be an all-hazard threat, but again, all threats are on the lower side of things, but not zero, so we have to talk about them. And then from Houston to Lake Charles and New Orleans there in Louisiana, Biloxi, Mississippi, and then over to Mobile on our Wednesday. Those are the zones we're watching. Now, here's what we're looking at here. I'm using the NAM model. I actually like the way this plays this out here. We've got kind of this warm air lifting off the Gulf of Mexico, and it's a very thin window of it. We don't have much storm energy to work with out of this system. We don't have a lot of wind shear either, but what we do have is just enough of everything to get a little bit of a severe weather threat and an all-hazard event down here closer to the Gulf Coast. Now, in the morning, what you're seeing here, these showers and storms, these could be flood producers. We'll talk about the flood threat a little bit more here in just a second. But those will be lifting northward through Houston during the early morning commute. From Austin, Texas, up to Shreveport, Louisiana, looks like some showers and storms will continue to be kind of convecting on off towards the north, so to speak, there as we make our way through the mid to late morning hours, 8, 9, 10. 11 o'clock Central Time in the morning, some storms through that region. Now, this could form a little bit of a complex of storms. We'll have to monitor northeast Texas and northern Louisiana throughout the daytime hours here for some sort of storm complex. You can see that closer to Tyler, maybe a cell south of Shreveport. Could we get an embedded tornado in that? Yes. I don't really expect to see more than maybe 1 or 2 tornado warnings during the daylight hours of tomorrow. Now, again, that could change. Be ready to receive those alerts. But again, this is a very broken event. You can see still pieces in southeast Texas and southwest Louisiana as a front now approaches during our evening of our Tuesday. But as we go Tuesday night into Wednesday, I think that's when our best chance for maybe a few spin-ups and those gusty winds. This is really at least a little bit more in the way of the certainty on this threat. Back down here, right along that immediate Gulf Coast in southeast Texas, I think that's where we have the chance for some gusty winds, maybe 50 to 60 miles per hour in some of these storms. Could briefly see a spin-up tornado. Yes, a couple of warnings not out of the question. You can see that pushing through Houston and looking like it turns quickly into a line. If any discrete cells were ever present, quickly turns into a little bit more of a damaging wind threat. And as we kind of make our way into our Wednesday during the daylight hours, this definitely translates into more of a wind threat, maybe some isolated hail along this line. Could we see some severe weather as far north as northeastern Mississippi? Wouldn't rule that out. But again, we're going to continue to watch this focal area closer to southeast Texas, southwest Louisiana throughout the day on our Wednesday, as that line continues just kind of hanging around. And of course, since that line is hanging around, we also monitor that same line for some flooding that could push as far north into parts of Arkansas, as well as into parts of Tennessee, including places like Nashville. Now, again, there's that first system falling apart as it heads off towards the northeast. Here's that next one. Again, no wintry precipitation up there in Illinois, Indiana, Michigan out of this next one. But again, the flood threat really gets raised up into our Wednesday as those storms continue over southeast Texas, southern Louisiana, as well as parts of Mississippi. Maybe some brief freezing rain, by the way, on the northern end of that system. That would be the extent of any wintry precipitation. Also watching some rain, as well as some cascade snowfall up there into parts of the Pacific Northwest on our Wednesday as a new system hits there. And really, this is what I'm trying to show you. We got kind of a terrain of systems. They're not very fast-moving. They're not very strong. And you can see they are kind of big and expansive, though. Here we go into our Thursday morning. We've got rain stretching up to southern New England, but some storms extending all the way back down to the Gulf Coast as that southerly push continues. This is also what's helping to draw in a lot more of that warm air as we push through time this week as well. You can see that storm heading on off towards the east throughout our Thursday and into our Friday. Could we see a little snow through Maine out of that? Yes, but otherwise no wintry precipitation there. And then again, it looks like we've got another potential storm system on our hands, and again, that one kind of translates out of the west. and then heads east, kind of moving through Oklahoma and Texas to start late Friday night into our Saturday, and then this gets going through other parts of the southeast and then heading on off eventually towards the northeast on Saturday and into our Sunday. So this is as we go into the morning of January 28th. A little bit more of a classic low pressure signature there, so we'll have to see if we can at least get another marginally to slightly conducive severe weather threat on the southern end of that, especially from the Arklatex eastward. I do not foresee outbreaks of severe weather, though, out of anything in our near future. High pressure really looking to take back over as we head towards the very end of the month, and that's going to be warmer high pressure, by the way, as well. Also, again, here's the rainfall that we're going to be seeing. We've got a level 3 flood threat out of 4 in parts of East Texas and northwestern Louisiana, with a broader slight risk from northeast Texas on over to Mississippi for our Tuesday and into our Wednesday. You can see flood threat stretches from places like Houston all the way on up to Nashville, but our best flood threat can include Shreveport, Louisiana, through Jackson, Mississippi, even on up closer to Tupelo there in Mississippi, and in northwestern Alabama, just west of the Huntsville region. Watching those areas for some of that heavier rainfall in that flood threat. And here's what the forecast rainfall does look like through just Thursday morning out of the Weather Prediction Center. Taking a look at that near-term forecast. 4 to 6 inches in those yellowish shades you see there, including parts of eastern Texas, southern Arkansas, northwestern Louisiana, and northern Mississippi. I guarantee you someone in here is going to probably see some sort of dangerous flash flood warning, maybe even a flash flood emergency issued. So be ready to get to higher ground and try to stay away from flooded roadways, of course. Closer to the west coast, precipitation events beginning to calm down just a little bit for the time being. Again, here we go, 6 to 10 day temperature probability outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. So this is as we head towards the 28th of January, all the way to the first day of February, and you can see warmer than average air as ridging builds over the north central U.S. especially, but we will enter a much drier time in contrast to what we have now, with the only places looking a little wetter than average closer to the west coast at that point. All right, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for sticking with me and enjoying this one. And that's it. So hit that subscribe button. Here are the credits.